Sorry about the false start. It's just me getting used to my my equipment here, and just trying to get all of my ducks in a row, as it were. So I did have a false start because I realized that I hadn't let people know what I was going to be doing tonight. So I added a couple of things to the description because I had a couple of thoughts. Imagine that. So I was putting together some montages of the immigration situation, trying to put some background together, because I'm really curious about how things have changed over the past few years. We've had a lot of politicians saying various things about the immigration situation, and it seems that basically whatever Trump says, the Democrats are going to say that they disagree with it. The guy's a Nazi, clearly. So without it becoming a situation between the red and blue factions, as it were, I thought it would be really interesting just to take a look at the individuals and see what they had to say about immigration over the years. And I did put together a bit of a longer montage, and it involves the Clintons, the two of the Clintons, and Obama. I thought I might start, though, with, let me take a look here. I thought I might start with McCain and Schumer, because this is from, I think it was about 2013. I should have the dates on here, but it doesn't really matter in a sense. The point is, I guess, really what they're trying to say is that everybody agrees that there's an immigration problem. But what is even more interesting than that is the reasons, the humanitarian reasons behind wanting to make sure that the immigration, the border is kept under control. They can see that there's clearly a desire for the people in their in their constituencies, whether it's McCain talking about his particular area in Arizona, or whether it's Obama talking about the country, or Schumer talking as the Speaker of the House, I believe, at that time. Regardless of what their role is, they definitely have an agenda that is in keeping with what's happening right now with Trump wanting to secure the border. And what it says to me is just it's political with a big P. It's not. It goes way beyond personalities or anything like that. And I wonder what the bigger agenda is. That's my question. I always I look at the packages that were sent, and call me cynical, but I just feel like these are all false flags in their own way. And I could be proven to be wrong at any moment, but I just feel like there's a desperation that's set in with the deep state, whatever you want to call the deep state, the cabal, the gang, the team, the crew, as Dr. Judy calls them. People try to delineate who these people are. I say it's anybody who has been involved with drug running, child trafficking, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever it is. I mean, you look at the slush fund that they have in Congress for those that have been caught diddling, as they say, with their interns or anybody else, and they've been secretly paying these people out. Well, there's nothing worse in the mind of a person who's trying to get away with something than to have the light shone on what they're doing. So it makes perfect sense to me that there would be a lot of things going on in the background that we are just not aware of. However, when I started looking at some of these things, let me just take a look here at see if I can bring up a couple of these articles that I've been looking at, because I think it's really helpful when we sorry, we'll take that. I really apologize. I'm not very quick at this right now, but let's just go over here. I was using a different piece of software. It doesn't really matter. But if I had an engineer, it would be so much easier. But I'm producing and hosting, so bear with me if you wouldn't mind. So this is actually an interesting article that I found when I was doing some research. This is, it's from the 22nd, so it's not really that far back, but I hadn't seen it for some reason. So, but I find it quite interesting. We have this threat here. Venezuela declares its military prepared for war with the U.S. Now, the reason I probably didn't think much of it if I did see it was that I thought, oh, yeah, okay, sure, well, I don't know how that's going to happen. Excuse me while I make a little bit of noise here. And I wasn't really sure, how that tied in with everything. Then today we had this is from the 23rd. I believe today's the 24th. So today we have Mike Pence saying that the Honduran president told me, this is Mike Pence speaking, that Venezuela is funding the migrant caravan. Okay, so when you put those things, we start to do your research and you start to put these things together. Here I was putting together my montages and then thinking about these packages that had been sent and sort of, it was a bit of an eye roll that I was doing there because I was thinking, okay, so Debbie Wasserman Schultz is now involved in this. I mean, she's a piece of work as well. And so it starts to boggle the mind in a certain way when you think about all the different aspects of this story until you start to hone in. And of course, I'm listening to George Webb and I'm trying to get as much information as I can about what's happening with all of the other situations and trying to see the big picture. And I'm a bit of a big picture person. I don't necessarily hone in on each story. I try to get a sense of things, and my mind works. I'm a filmmaker, so my mind works in this way that I can kind of put things together in a kind of random way. It's almost like a mind map. And it's great that we have these other folks that, hone in on the details, because this just really stood out to me because of the combination of events. And so I had never really thought about the fact that Venezuela would be paying for this migrant horde, migrant army, as I say in the description. I wouldn't have thought of it. I used the word army when I originally did the description. And then I thought, well, this could be exactly that. And it's so it's suiting the purposes of so many people. And, then I thought about the idea that people are taking a stance on the socialist issue. That's a whole other line of reasoning and thinking that's going on right now. We're seeing all sorts of folks coming forward and basically saying, we're just going to dump the whole idea of this republic, and we're going to look at the whole idea of democratic socialism. Don't get that confused with socialism, folks. So, when this could be totally off base, but this is just the way that my mind is thinking, and I'm hoping that you might weigh in on this because I'm just throwing out some ideas as I consider this. I've really gotten back into my journalistic side. I've done a lot of shows with Dr. Judy Wood and with various other people, and since I've gotten the Airstream Studio set up finally in its new location, I have to tell you it's been a bit of a slog, and one day I'll take you on a tour so you can see the equipment. When people walk in, they go, my Lord, not only do I have a lot of equipment, but I have a lot of instruments. So that's the other side too. I'd love to get, if all of this other crap wasn't happening, I always ask people, if we didn't have this to focus on, if everything was perfect in the world, what would we be doing? Would be creative, or and sometimes people don't know what they would be doing. Well, I know what I'd be doing. I'd be getting more music happening in my life, because it's often quite a distraction to be doing all of this kind of research, and to know that there's an army that is gathering, and the fact that it's being paid for by now, financed here. If we look down at this paragraph, second to the bottom here, the vice president then revealed that Hernandez told him that leftist groups from the Central American country which is, I believe, Ecuador. So he's talking about Venezuela. So I didn't actually catch which Central American country, but I do believe that he was talking about Ecuador as well, but he may be referring to Venezuela itself, but that is actually not a Central American country. But anyway, it's financed by Venezuela to challenge our sovereignty, challenge our border. Okay? So those are pretty strong words. And then again, when you go back to this other article here from the 22nd, which I had totally missed, it's interesting. Venezuela's desperate. You know, you look at all these desperate people, and you whether it's the Democrats or whether it's the Venezuelans or whether it's the Hondurans, you know, that are being used as pawns. You see this confluence of events, and then you start to see it as being quite a threat. It's actually a bit of a military action that's taking place here, especially if it's being financed by a country that has said that they're prepared for war. And then they, you know, within the article, it does say our armed forces, I believe, are prepared to resist those attacks of the North American imperialism of the European Union because they have a great conscience. So, you know, part of it is desperation and part of it is delusion, I guess. But I find it really disconcerting. I'm really thankful for my faith, and I don't get too panicky about these things as people might, because I do believe that although we've given over of the sovereignty of this world to some pretty evil entities, I do believe in my way that good will prevail. And I guess this is really a call to action for my audiences, those that pray, those that would stand against this, because I think it goes far deeper than the midterm elections or anything else. And I think that the people who are wanting to regain power in whatever way that is are actually really using these things, and who knows, orchestrating them perhaps in the background. And I was listening to somebody who said that when Hillary Clinton was talking about the package that was sent today, that she sounded like she was reading off of a script, and that would not surprise me at all that she was. You know, usually when people have packages sent to their home, they have some emotion, and they don't necessarily need a script to read off of. But I think the people are only letting her read off scripts because whenever she goes ad hoc, she goes ad wild. And so there's this other, you know, I did go back to take a look at this other article. This is from July 21st, 2018. Hell in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba puts Democrats and their beloved S word on the spot in Florida. Democrats have been feeling their oats with socialism these days, basking in the wins they've gotten. The ascent of Democratic Socialists of America member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in a Democratic congressional primary in New York has given them a new battery. Ocasio's their new it girl. Well, we heard about that in July, but it kind of goes to the idea that this socialist narrative has been brought to the fore in the Democratic Party. And I guess, too, what I was trying to do is to take a look at how that narrative has changed in a very short time, really, when you think about it. So what I'm going to do is play this Schumer McCain. You know, McCain's no longer with us, but this was, I'm pretty sure it was 2013 when he was still in health. And I think what I'm going to do is just take this guy off. And I do apologize again for being a little bit slow on the uptake here. But I'm going to bring up this.
A big part of the immigration bill that you and the other members of the Gang of Eight unveiled yesterday is about border security. Some people are very skeptical that this actually would beef up border security in any substantive way, Senator Schumer. Can you understand why they're skeptical? There have been so many promises in the past about securing the border that have not come through.
Well, John has convinced me that we need to do more on the border. And let me give you one statistic. He and I actually passed legislation about 3 years ago that added $1 billion to the border. And in many places, particularly the very busy Tucson sector, the effectiveness rate was 68%. After that $1 billion, it went up to 82%. So we believe if we do more of the same things there, we can get it. And what John showed me when we visited the border, how much they need equipment. They don't have enough drones. They don't have enough aircraft. You know, you can't cover the border with just fence and personnel. A lot of it's rugged, it's desolate. But if you have in the air, you can watch anyone who crosses the border. You can catch them 50 or 75 miles inland. So we can do better on the border, and the American people are demanding it. My view is that most Americans will be for a fair, balanced, common sense approach to legal immigration and the 11 million living in the shadows, but only if they believe that we'll secure the border and not have a third wave of illegal immigration. So I'm willing to do that, and I think most of my colleagues on the Democratic side are willing to do that, even those of us far away from border states, southern border states.
Senator McCain, I'll let you have the last word. Two quick questions. One is, anecdotally, I've heard that there are people who are making their way across the border illegally who are doing so because they hope that they will be able to become citizens because of this immigration reform bill. Have you heard those stories from Arizona or elsewhere? And lastly, can you deliver 60 votes to make this bill happen?
I believe we can. In answer to your second question, I believe we can. As far as the increased crossing of the border, I think part of it has to do with the economy, part of it has to do with sequestration. Anyone who came after December 31st, 2011 will not be eligible for this legalized status and eventual path to citizenship. I want to thank Chuck Schumer for coming to the border and seeing it, and seeing the immensity of the problem, and frankly being an advocate for Arizona and border control. People are skeptical, Jake, because we promised them so many times that we would control the border. Now, we have made improvements, as Chuck just said, but we're a long way from there, and the drugs are still flowing too, which is another issue that we're going to have to face as a nation as well, because there's still a big demand for them, as you know.
There's no drugs. These are really good guys. What are we talking about here? I mean, this is... Again, what I was thinking about was the hypocrisy, because at the beginning of the year when we were doing the PSYOP recovery program with Dr. Judy, she and I were talking about the idea of honesty and what difference that makes. And I've been really looking at honesty as just a part of the character-driven life, and how easy it is to slip into dishonesty, and how people can talk out of both sides of their mouths, how they can and we're not talking about politicians here. We're talking about people who are, and again, I'm going to bring up the political thing, but people who are just going lockstep along with anything that is being said by Pelosi or Schumer, anybody now, without going back and questioning them on this. And this is, the way I was raised was that it was okay to question. Now, granted, I've gotten myself into a lot of trouble by questioning people and holding them to what they've said, and I would expect the same of me. And that to me is what character-driven is the idea that we put forward our own ideas, and they could vary, they can differ from one another. And that's what character is, as compared to everybody having the same opinion. When we have character, we're putting out our own ideas, and we're not afraid to stand for them, although now it's getting kind of dangerous to do that. And so I have to admit that sometimes I feel a little bit intimidated by making a strident comment. And this doesn't just include politics. This includes serving on boards. This includes having any kind of opinion that might be considered or construed as being so-called right-wing, which is pretty much insane, because if you listen to these guys now in the context of our current political situation, you go, hey, that Schumer, that McCain, they're a couple of right-wingers. And I think it's interesting because McCain was actually a Republican, and ran for the Republican Party in his run for the presidency, and there they are standing together. And you just look at the climate, but more so than that, were people cooperating with one another, or were they all on the same basic side? Because McCain's dirty, Schumer's dirty. If you look at all these people and you see their dealings, they just had a really nice thing going until Trump came along and just started to expose things. And that's the experience that I've had when I've been on a board and I've said something like, well, we passed this budget that said thus and so, and now you're doing thus and so. And I've literally been kicked off of boards because I've, had the nerve to hold people to what they said. And there's no more or less to it, but I've had the same thing where we're now going to smear you. We're going to find something on you so that we can get you. So I've seen it on a very small level, so I can't even imagine what it's like in the swamp for these guys that are trying, so I look at Trump as just a ballsy kind of a guy, like him or not, yeah, he's coarse, but and the thing about it is that there's nothing that he's doing now that he wasn't doing before. He was elected as somebody who had had a less than stellar reputation when it came to his dalliances and that sort of thing. But another thing I've been doing is going back and taking a look at some of the interviews with Trump. And I find it really interesting to see because one of the ones was on David Letterman. I think it was the last one was 2015. One before that was 2013. And they're back and forth. And of course, Dave gives him a hard time, which is great. But then I saw David Letterman doing his, when I did have Netflix, I saw him doing his Netflix thing and just bashing Trump, as a president. And again, I just go, is it because he's the president, or can you name something that you disagree with? So I guess the reason that I wanted to do these little clips is because I want to remind us of what the flavor was. And just a very short time ago, we have one here from our friend Obama who basically, he was lecturing us, as he often did, on immigration and the ills of immigration. Let me just see if we can get this one.
There is bipartisan hope of getting it done. This year, the Senate passed an immigration reform bill by a wide bipartisan majority, and it addresses the key issues that need to be addressed. It would strengthen our borders. It would level the playing field by holding employers accountable if they knowingly hire undocumented workers. It would modernize our legal immigration system so that we eliminate the backlog of family visas and make it easier to attract highly skilled entrepreneurs from beyond our borders.
Doesn't he come up with good ideas?
It would make sure that everybody plays by the same rules by providing a pathway to earn citizenship for those who are living in the shadows. A path that includes passing a background check and learning English and paying taxes and a penalty and getting in line behind it, everyone trying to come here the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these pieces would go a long way towards fixing our broken immigration system. Each of them has been supported by Democrats and Republicans in the past. There's no reason we can't come together and get it done.
Right. Yes, sir.
And what's more, we know the immigration reform that we're proposing would boost our economy and shrink our deficits.
Wow.
Independent economists have said that if the Senate bill became law over the next 2 decades, our economy would grow by $1.4 trillion more, and it would reduce our deficits by $850 billion more. And you don't have to be an economist to figure out that workers will be more productive if they've got their families here with them. They're not worried about deportation. They're not living halfway around the world. This isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Right now, it's up to Republicans in the House to decide if we can move forward as a country on this bill.
Well, that really is the question, isn't it? It really is the question. Can we move forward on this bill? Well, can we be bipartisan? When you take a look at what's happening right now, and you take a look at the army coming up toward the border, and then you hear people. and the rhetoric, it's mind-boggling to me. And that's why I went back just to listen to see if I was hearing things correctly, because you tend to forget. I was around in the first Clinton era, and I heard them. I was specifically heard them and what they had to say. I heard Obama. And so what I did, this is a little bit long, and I'm going to play it into the show tonight, just because I think it's really worthwhile. It does take a little bit of listening to, but you'll hear from Hillary and Bill and Obama, and those are the people who got the bombs today, which I find kind of interesting. Who else was it? There was somebody else that got, well, it was a bomb threat anyway. Things were directed to them. And I'm just looking at them and thinking about them, because, you hear about this thing happening and you're just going, okay, so what are they covering up by their sudden change of viewpoint as far as the border is concerned? And I find this one interview quite interesting, because they're discussing the fact that there are children. There's quite a crisis at the border, and there's these poor children there. And what does Hillary Clinton want to do about it? They don't, I don't think they want us to watch this, which is why I think it's so important to do that. So I'm going to add this into the show, and I'm going to let folks listen to it and remember this, and go back, do your own research, and see. I've tried to put it in as much context as possible. However, I didn't want to bore people to death, so it's long enough as it is. Hopefully it will help you remember what their particular opinions were and their ideas about immigration and the border situation. That's another one of my bads. Sorry about that. I will get that going for you.
We've got to do several things, and I am, adamantly against illegal immigrants. I made this exception basically on humanitarian grounds because of the individual stories, but certainly we've got to do more at our borders, and people have to stop employing illegal immigrants. Come up to Westchester, go to Suffolk and Nassau counties, stand in the street corners in Brooklyn or the Bronx. You're going to see loads of people waiting to get picked up to go do yard work and construction work. We've got to do several things, and I am, adamantly against illegal immigrants. I made this exception basically on humanitarian grounds because of the individual stories, but certainly we've got to do more at our borders, and people have to stop employing illegal immigrants. Come up to Westchester, go to Suffolk and Nassau counties, stand in the street corners in Brooklyn or the Bronx. You're going to see loads of people waiting to get picked up to go do yard work and construction work and domestic work.
But listen to this. We've had this crisis in recent days of all these children stacking up in detention centers at the border. On that one, Hillary Clinton took a much tougher line, saying, no, they can't stay.
They should be sent back as soon as it can be determined who responsible adults and their families are, because there are concerns about whether all of them can be sent back, but I think all of them who can be should be reunited with their families.
We are a nation of immigrants, and we should all be proud of it. But we're also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws that we have seen in recent years. There is too much of it, and we must do much more to stop it.
My fellow Americans, tonight I'd like to talk with you about immigration. For more than 200 years, our tradition of welcoming immigrants from around the world has given us a tremendous advantage over other nations. It's kept us youthful, dynamic, and entrepreneurial. It has shaped our character as a people with limitless possibilities. People not trapped by our past, but able to remake ourselves as we choose. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. Families who enter our country the right way and play by the rules watch others flout the rules.
Listen to his language.
Business owners who offer their workers good wages and benefits see the competition exploit undocumented immigrants by paying them far less.
The right way.
All of us take offense to anyone who reaps the rewards of living in America without taking on the responsibilities of living in America. And undocumented immigrants who desperately want to embrace those responsibilities see little option but to remain in the shadows or risk their families being torn apart. It's been this way for decades. And for decades, we haven't done much about it. When I took office, I committed to fixing this broken immigration system. And I began by doing what I could to secure our borders. Today, we have more agents and technology deployed to secure our southern border than at any time in our history. And over the past 6 years, illegal border crossings have been cut by more than half. Although this summer there was a brief spike in unaccompanied children being apprehended at our border, the number of such children is now actually lower than it's been in nearly 2 years. Overall, the number of people trying to cross our border illegally is at its lowest level since the 1970s. Those are the facts. Meanwhile, I worked with Congress on a comprehensive fix. And last year, 68 Democrats, Republicans, and independents came together to pass a bipartisan bill in the Senate. It wasn't perfect. It was a compromise. But it reflected common sense. It would have doubled the number of Border Patrol agents while giving undocumented immigrants a pathway to citizenship if they paid a fine, started paying their taxes, and went to the back of the line.
Okay.
And independent experts said that it would help grow our economy and shrink our deficits. Had the House of Representatives allowed that kind of bill a simple yes or no vote, it would have passed with support from both parties. And today it would be the law. But for a year and a half now, Republican leaders in the House have refused to allow that simple vote. Now, I continue to believe that the best way to solve this problem is by working together to pass that kind of common sense law. But until that happens, there are actions I have the legal authority to take as president, the same kinds of actions taken by Democratic and Republican presidents before me, that will help make our immigration system more fair and more just. Tonight, I'm announcing those actions. First, we'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. Second, I'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs to stay and contribute to our economy, as so many business leaders have proposed. Third, we'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country. I want to say more about this third issue because it generates the most passion and controversy. Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. That's why over the past 6 years, deportations of criminals are up 80%. And that's why we're going to keep focusing enforcement resources on actual threats to our security. Felons, not families. Criminals, not children. Gang members, not a mom who's working hard to provide for her kids. We'll prioritize, just like law enforcement does every day. But even as we focus on deporting criminals, the fact is millions of immigrants in every state, of every race and nationality, still live here illegally. And let's be honest, tracking down, rounding up, and deporting millions of people isn't realistic. Anyone who suggests otherwise isn't being straight with you. It's also not who we are as Americans. After all, most of these immigrants have been here a long time. They work hard, often in tough, low-paying jobs. They support their families. They worship at our churches. Many of their kids are American-born or spent most of their lives here. And their hopes, dreams, and patriotism are just like ours. As my predecessor, President Bush, once put it, they are a part of American life. Now, here's the thing. We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. So we're going to offer the following deal. If you've been in America for more than 5 years, if you have children who are American citizens or legal residents, if you register pass a criminal background check, and you're willing to pay your fair share of taxes, you'll be able to apply to stay in this country temporarily without fear of deportation. You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. That's what this deal is. Now let's be clear about what it isn't. This deal does not apply to anyone who has come to this country recently. It does not apply to anyone who might come to America illegally in the future. It does not grant citizenship or the right to stay here permanently or offer the same benefits that citizens receive. Only Congress can do that. All we're saying is we're not going to deport you. I know some of the critics of this action call it amnesty. Well, it's not. Amnesty is the immigration system we have today. Millions of people who live here without paying their taxes or playing by the rules, while politicians use the issue to scare people and whip up votes at election time. That's the real amnesty, leaving this broken system the way it is. Mass amnesty would be unfair. Mass deportation would be both impossible and contrary to our character. What I'm describing is accountability, a common-sense middle ground approach. If you meet the criteria, you can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half-century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill. I want to work with both parties to pass a more permanent legislative solution. And the day I sign that bill into law, the actions I take will no longer be necessary. Meanwhile, don't let a disagreement over a single issue be a deal breaker on every issue. That's not how our democracy works. And Congress certainly shouldn't shut down our government again just because we disagree on this. Americans are tired of gridlock. What our country needs from us right now is a common purpose, a higher purpose. Most Americans support the types of reforms I've talked about tonight, but I understand the disagreements held by many of you at home. Millions of us, myself included, go back generations in this country with ancestors who put in the painstaking work to become citizens. So we don't like the notion that anyone might get a free pass to American citizenship. I know some worry immigration will change the very fabric of who we are, or take our jobs, or stick it to middle-class families at a time when they already feel like they've gotten the raw deal for over a decade. I hear those concerns. But that's not what these steps would do. Our history and the facts show that immigrants are a net plus for our economy and our society. And I believe it's important that all of us have this debate without impugning each other's character. Because for all the back and forth of Washington, we have to remember that this debate is about something bigger. It's about who we are as a country and who we want to be for future generations. Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law? Or are we a nation that gives them a chance to make amends, take responsibility, and give their kids a better future? Are we a nation that accepts the cruelty of ripping children from their parents' arms? Or are we a nation that values families and works together to keep them together? Are we a nation that educates the world's best and brightest in our universities only to send them home to create businesses in countries that compete against us? Or are we a nation that encourages them to stay and create jobs here, create businesses here, create industries right here in America? That's what this debate is all about. We need more than politics as usual when it comes to immigration. We need reasoned, thoughtful, compassionate debate that focuses on our hopes, not our fears. I know the politics of this issue are tough, But let me tell you why I have come to feel so strongly about it. Over the past years, I've seen the determination of immigrant fathers who worked 2 or 3 jobs without taking a dime from the government, and at risk any moment of losing it all, just to build a better life for their kids. I've seen the heartbreak and anxiety of children whose mothers might be taken away from them just because they didn't have the right papers. I've seen the courage of students who, except for the circumstances of their birth, are as American as Malia or Sasha, students who bravely come out as undocumented in hopes they could make a difference in the country they love. These people, our neighbors, our classmates, our friends, they did not come here in search of a free ride or an easy life. They came to work and study and serve in our military, and above all, contribute to America's success. Now, tomorrow I'll travel to Las Vegas and meet with some of these students, including a young woman named Airstream Studio. Astrid was brought to America when she was 4 years old. Her only possessions were a cross, her doll, and the frilly dress she had on. When she started school, she didn't speak any English. She caught up to other kids by reading newspapers and watching PBS. And she became a good student. Her father worked in landscaping. Her mom cleaned other people's homes. They wouldn't let Astrid apply to a technology magnet school, not because they didn't love her, but because they were afraid the paperwork would out her as an undocumented immigrant. So she applied behind their back and got in. Still, she mostly lived in the shadows until her grandmother, who visited every year from Mexico, passed away. And she couldn't travel to the funeral without risk of being found out and deported. It was around that time she decided to begin advocating for herself and others like her. And today, Airstream Studio is a college student working on her 3rd degree. Are we a nation that kicks out a striving, hopeful immigrant like Airstream? Or are we a nation that finds a way to welcome her in? Scripture tells us that we shall not oppress a stranger, for we know the heart of a stranger. We were strangers once too. My fellow Americans, we are and always will be a nation of immigrants. We were strangers once too. And whether our forebears were strangers who crossed the Atlantic or the Pacific or the Rio Grande, we are here only because this country welcomed them in and taught them that to be an American is about something more than what we look like or what our last names are or how we worship. What makes us Americans is our shared commitment to an ideal, that all of us are created equal, and all of us have the chance to make of our lives what we will. That's the country our parents and grandparents and generations before them built for us. That's the tradition we must uphold. That's the legacy we must leave for those who are yet to come.
Sir, or do you want people to come in from other parts of the world where there are people of color?
Thank you. Jim, thank you.
I had to end with that. It was an eloquent and elegant speech that Obama gave, and if only he and his followers and people who voted for him would actually stand behind those words, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now. And I think that's the reason I wanted to have it in context. I thought about cutting it down, taking out some of the stuff that I found personally difficult because it's so hypocritical, in the sense that you wouldn't think that the same people existed on the face of the earth as far as that's concerned. But I believe that was 2015. It was not that long ago that he gave that speech, and he talks a lot about the same issues that are going on now, including, I had forgotten that he includes the part about the children being taken away from their parents. I mean, that was on his watch. It was on the watch before him as well. It was Clinton that came up with the Flores Agreement because there was problems back then in 1998, 1997. So I think it's instructive to take a look at this and sort of just calm everything down to the point where we can sort of take a look at history and the context, because these are presidents. These are people who will go down in history for their words and their actions. How did their actions line up with their words? And I think what people are wanting right now is somebody that will just follow through, be honest, and just say something that gets them voted in and follow through and, keep the country safe. And I think it's more important than ever that this is not just a little thing. This is not just about housekeepers anymore that Hillary was talking about, the people standing on the corners. She's always so compassionate. It's not just about people getting an education for free or being on welfare or anything else. There are gang members. There's child trafficking going on. And the child trafficking is my particular issue. It's very volatile and people don't believe it when I tell them that there's trafficking going on. I don't think a wall is going to stop people from trafficking, but it'll certainly change the dynamic. I think that there's lots of things that are needed, but it has to start with everybody being on the same page. And if indeed there's any complicity between the Democratic Party and, say, Venezuela or Mexico or anybody else to be able to obfuscate, to cover up the crimes that have been committed by people, and it's not just the people that we see out in front. Of course, we know Hillary needs to be locked up. Of course, we know that at least there needs to be an investigation. Of course, I don't believe that we should be suggesting that people are guilty until they have a chance to have a trial. It's a weird thing about that, It's that because otherwise we are in the exact same boat that the people who are advocating public lynchings are in. The mob mentality, and yes, I do use that word. And I found it interesting because I believe it was actually Clinton that used that word. And Obama actually alluded to it as well. And now, we couldn't possibly call people a mob. No. And so it's this kind of hypocrisy that I'm trying to bring out. And I think that the more that we bring this to the attention of other people, share it, show other people this in context and with history as our guide and with proper investigation as our guide, the more we are going to be able to show people what the real issue is. We're not having an argument here really about anything. It's clear that a country needs to have borders. It's clear that to be able to have borders, you have to be able to enforce the borders. These people that are wanting to eliminate ICE, for instance, they're bordering on insanity. I mean, when you start listening to them and you start, and you look at Elizabeth Warren and her all the true colors are coming out because they're being pushed by somebody who is actually trying to follow through on the things that they were voted into office to complete. And whether Trump had only just done the things that he was voted in on, the wall issue, for instance, if that was all we were talking about here, the thing that drives them crazy is that that it's actually just being done, and there's the truth is coming forward, which will always happen when people are pressed on their values. So that's exactly what character is all about. When we get pressed on our values, we tend to show our true colors. I did want to show another clip from Quite Frankly, but it's getting to be very long. And so if any of you haven't heard about Quite Frankly, I highly recommend that you go over and take a look at that channel. I really enjoy listening to Frank and Rob. In this case, he had Rob on as a guest, and they were discussing the whole situation and the fact that people were being paid. And again, I want to just reiterate that the question for me is, at this point, who is doing the paying? And I think that's a really, really important thing that we need to be looking at. And we need to be sharing this information with other people who don't realize what an important issue this is, what they don't recognize the gravity of the situation. They just don't see what the big deal is. What's the big whoop? Well, it's not just about people coming across the borders. It's not whether there's not even whether they're gang members. I mean, we're talking about this is likely more like an invasion, even if it was just an invasion of young men who were not gang members, but who were indoctrinated in any way. It sounds as though Venezuela was doing its own fair share of indoctrination. And if they have any desire to disrupt, whether it's an election or whether it is just people's lives in general, that's a fairly serious situation. So I really suggest that we get into some discussions with people who, again, don't necessarily see the big deal, and show them some of these articles and show them. I'm going to be putting them up on Red Pill Square so that they will be in one place, but you can certainly go over to Breitbart and take a look and see what's up. As far as, I'm just going to bring this up. This is actually from AmericanThinker.com. I haven't put the link in the description, but this is from July the 21st, I believe it is. July 21st, 2018. Hell in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba puts Democrats and their beloved S-word on the spot in Florida. And a lot has changed from that time. That was really the beginning when this election took place, Ocasio, and when they decided that this was the way that they were going to go. This was going to be the big blue wave. This is their claim to fame. And so it's interesting, this article. I mean, there's a lot in it. If Democrats want to win the Hispanic vote in Florida, a key swing state in upcoming elections, it won't be enough for them to say that President Trump locks up immigrant infants in cages, as though, that wasn't happening in Obama's era. And I think that's why it's important to have that Obama clip in context. That's been happening for many, many years, if not decades. Sides with Russia's President Vladimir Putin against U.S. intelligence, which is a total fake story. I mean, and that's all coming out. You see, everything's unraveling. Everything's unraveling for them. We're on to them. Like people like us who are reporting on this have brought out the truth, and so it's very difficult for them every time they're proven to be lying or obfuscating to find another way to win. And so then they're just going to go full socialist on us, and so it says Democratic candidates will need to speak out much louder about the crimes against humanity that are taking place in Nicaragua and Venezuela, and denounce Trump's refusal to consider asylum petitions from large numbers of people fleeing the horrors of Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. So you see how this ties in with this story. Again, the story from the 22nd of October, where Venezuela is declaring its military fully prepared for war with the U.S. And then today, I'm sorry, it's yesterday, but for all intents and purposes, it was today that it got some traction. Not that I'm hearing about it particularly, so I want to make sure that you're hearing about it, is that Pence himself said on Tuesday that Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez told him that the migrant caravan marching toward the U.S.-Mexico border is financed by Venezuela. And this is where I was going to put in a clip about, that shows the money being distributed, particularly amongst the women. They specifically say the women, they're paying the women because that's how they do it. It's sealed as trick in the book. Embed the women and children so that they are protected. You know, it's the scaredy cat method. You know, if you're going to march and if you're going to invade another country, then at least, you know, don't put your women and children out front and don't pay them to be there. So, you know, exploitation left and right. And what did Obama say? We don't want to be exploiting people. Well, you know, let's hold people to their belief systems. And when we put their words out there, we're not making up this stuff, folks. We're putting out their words, and then we hold them up against what's happening here, that there is, in this case, it says a 7,000 strong caravan. I've heard it's upward of 14,000. And that's a lot of people, you know, and the thing is that there's other people that are actually congregating behind this group. I've heard up to 50,000 as far as waves of immigrants. I guess this was all they could get. And think about this, how long it takes to walk, what kind of facilities are needed along the way, what kinds of food and shelter are needed. Apparently, somebody said that they were watching an interview with one of the immigrants, and then they pulled the camera back and they could see that they were sitting on a flatbed truck. So the idea is that they're actually being trucked up because it takes a long time to walk from Ecuador to through Mexico up to the border, but they're trying to get them here in time for the election. So you're going to find that they coincidentally arrive before the midterms. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say, but I think this is really worth looking at and sharing with people because it's gotten to the point now where it's not just a little conversation that we have about immigration, but we're actually talking about, if people haven't seen this particular article, if they haven't seen, you know, regardless of whether it's in Breitbart or anywhere else, if you can find it, it's probably in a Spanish-speaking paper because they often will have these stories. It's often where they get the stories from. So if you can find your own, if you can source your own original story that is not in Breitbart, but no matter where it comes from, you know, I get really tired of this idea of, oh, well, that was written in Breitbart, so it can't be true. Well, you know, taught to Mike Pence, that's in Breitbart as well, but it's clearly he's not kidding around, you know. So put these things together and we'll put on our thinking caps, and hopefully we will be able to get out the word that this is not something to be taken lightly, and this is not something that is going to just pass by. There's going to be one wave after the other, after the other, after the other. I'm going to end with, quite frankly, if you guys want to tune out, that's fine, but I want to end with this clip from, quite frankly's show. I believe it was about a week ago, and well, it must have been last Friday actually, because Rob's on Fridays, and so I want to let you have a look at this, because for one thing, I think that he's quite brilliant the way he breaks it down, and if you're just tired of watching videos, tired of tuning in, then have a great night, and I will be back. I'm going to continue on with my investigation of this this story, and I'm going to make sure that I follow up on my hunches here, because I do believe that there's some stuff going on that is fairly insidious. So thanks for tuning in, you guys, and I really value your participation. If you have any thoughts, ideas, please mention them here, and please get involved in any way that you can.
Here's a video I think is very interesting here. You're seeing footage from Honduras here. People are giving out cash to women and children to join up with the caravan and storm the U.S. border right around election time. So you can accompany this, and you can put this off on whoever you want. Matt Gaetz put this out there, and he asked the question, is it Soros? Is it any other U.S.-backed non-government organization, the NGOs out there? Not everything has to be about Soros. There's plenty of other people that want to take down the Western world. But the fact that we have this on tape is all you need to know about how organic this is. Take a look at this. This is what's going on in Honduras. Look, handing out cash. Keep it moving. There it is. The woman already received it. Boom. That's it.
So they're organizing a mob to come invade our country.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And apparently they think that this right here is going to make Americans fall in love with these people. Not because not only I mean there's nothing worse to me than to go to websites last night or this morning and just seeing piles of Central and South American people, piles of them. They're actually piled on top of each other on the back of pickups, being, just all coming to America, waving their home flags.
What does it say about these organizers, though, that are just sending this human, cannon fodder for this?
I'm glad you used the word cannon fodder.
Well,
because
we do have a border patrol, and we do have some military heading down there. And I
going
hope
away.
to God that's not how this shakes out. But
you know what? I know people with hearts and people with intellect and that use logic will say that. I hope it's not how it turns out. But this is part of how ruthless the people that we are up, the movement, the ideology that we're up against right now.
Children coming.
Exactly.
I mean, this is like I know you talk to everybody. You talk to some Vietnam veterans and some of the things that they experienced over there. I mean, like World War II was something we couldn't comprehend, like the kamikaze fighter, right? It's like so alien to us. And then you saw what happened in Vietnam. Children walking up to you and shooting our guys and doing all horrible stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard some firsthand accounts. That's why it's like it hits me right here. But this is the same type of thing.
Oh, yeah. No, like I said, think about how ruthless these people are. They're paying poor people pennies to go and overwhelm a sovereign nation's border. It's a paid invasion force. And the worst part about this is they know damn well how dangerous this is to go and pay an invasion force to go and charge a country's borders. But sadly, I really do think, and I know that you do as well, that they want the worst possible result.
Of course they do.
Everything
of course
else,
they do. If children get massacred at the border, that is the best thing for these people organizing this. Now think how sick that is.
Well, yeah, because this would be an act of aggression by the Trump administration.
Of course.
Everything else domestically is failing. The narratives domestically are failing. Everything that the Democrats and these socialists put their names onto, everything that they actually approve of, fails. So here is a seemingly organic outside force that is now going to march toward our borders within the last 2 weeks of an election that has generated no enthusiasm for Democrats once again because all of their tricks are tried and played out. And here you have a seemingly organic force that we're starting to see is the farthest thing from organic, but can only benefit one party. You're telling me that this is not, like you said, cannon fodder. It's the scariest thing in the world.
Right. And it should really show these NPCs, what's behind this. Like, think about this for a second. If you really care about real human beings and real human endeavors, and this is what you're going to do,
yeah.